Guys, I feel like I'm gonna explode, okay? I feel like if you took a pin to my tummy, it would just pop. I'm about a week out from my due date, and it took every ounce of energy I had today to do this. But I wanted to bring you an episode before I go MIA for a week or two because I'll be having my baby, and today's Thanksgiving here in the US. I was supposed to shoot this yesterday, but I was exhausted and I mustered up just enough energy to do this today because I already had to get myself together for Thanksgiving dinner and stuff. So I figured I would do this. Might be a short episode. I don't know how long I'm going to be able to go because I can't even breathe. I wanted to get a guest this week, but it's a holiday week, so I'm just doing it solo. And then next episode you see me should be an interview. So today I want to talk about fear that's perpetuated in society that might not even exist or may be very different than we're told. The first topic is, are nukes even real? I don't know. Just like flat earth versus round earth, there's evidence that points to both, and I'm unsure. I don't have the answers, but I think it's worth looking into. So this past week at night, I've been doing a deep dive on whether nukes are real, and I came across this guy named Michael Palmer. He wrote a book called Hiroshima Revisited, because obviously, people make the argument, well, yeah, nukes are real. We used the atomic bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But did we? He makes a really good argument that it's very likely that it was not nuclear explosions. So, for one, all the steel and concrete was still intact, which shouldn't be the case. Another piece of key evidence would be for Hiroshima, there would be fallout, atomic fallout, and there was barely any. There was no evidence of highly enriched bomb uranium because uranium was used in Hiroshima, and in Nagasaki, plutonium was supposedly used, and there was a little bit of fallout, but it was concentrated in one spot far from the hypocenter. So the fallout should have been where the explosion actually happened, and it wasn't. And bomb grade uranium and plutonium supposedly were both unavailable in 1945. The buildings in both cases were etched by fire. And then people say, okay, well, what about the radiation sickness? Because there was plenty of evidence of radiation sickness. But there was a patient who was at the center of the explosion in a wooden building. He was thrown up 12 feet in the air, and he survived, and he should have died instantly. That testimony was completely discarded. And then a colonel by the name of Ashley Otterson, he was a doctor, he stated, it's difficult to explain the complete absence of radiation effects in a number of people who were theoretically exposed to lethal dosages of radiation. Once he came out and said that, he mysteriously died in a plane crash, right after. And there were 6 American doctors on a research commission at that time, and 3 of the 6 died mysteriously. So it wasn't just Ashley Otterson, but I guess he was the first one to speak out. And so if the sickness wasn't caused by radiation, then what was it? Apparently, it sounds like it was poison gases, and there was sulfur smells, which leads this researcher to believe that it was actually mustard gas. And the side effects to radiation are very similar to the gases, but there's a difference that with mustard gas and napalm, which was apparently also used, there's lung damage and capillary leaks, which were evident in like so many of the victims. And then another question that arises is, what about nuclear flash bombs? Well, they were napalm burns. There's photos of people, and there's famous photos of people, children, ripping their clothes off. That's what you do to avoid burns when they use napalm. And then nuclear flash burns should burn the retinas of the eyes. There was not a single case of a retina burn. That one's really stuck out to me. And then atomic shadows happen after a nuclear explosion, and it appears that they were actually painted on later. So how was it done? It was done napalm, mustard gas, and a firework type of explosion, is what this guy Michael says. Some of the explosions were done in the air, and then some of them on the ground. And then the little fallout that was found appears to be some sort of cloud seeding, because what happened was it rained like this oily black substance after, and it's believed that it was sprayed from the planes to disperse signs of radioactive fallout. We all know that cloud seeding's been used in warfare for a very long time, right? I mean, I think most of us do at this point. So that would make total sense. And in reality, you don't need them to, we don't need nuclear bombs to cause devastation anymore. Look at direct energy weapons and weather manipulation. I mean, there's so much evidence of weather manipulation and direct energy weapons here in the United States. Hawaii, with the roofs, all the cars and the houses with the blue roofs that didn't burn. Come on. And weather warfare, there's really no way to 100% prove that, it's weather manipulation. It's so easy. Shutting down the power grid is also going to cause way more devastation long term than nukes. So what I'm saying is, all of this fear about nuclear war from the mainstream alternative media and the mainstream media, I think it's very likely that it's all a bunch of bull crap. So the next topic I want to get into is the right seems to still be perpetuating this fear of wokeism and Marxism taking over society. And I remember it was about 8 years ago. I was still living in LA. I was still acting and going on auditions at the time. And I remember all of a sudden, it was like, 8 or 9 years ago, all of a sudden on the acting breakdowns, it would say Latinx and non-binary and all these terms that just popped out of nowhere that I never had heard of before. And I'm like, what the hell is up with this shit? And all of a sudden I started getting less and less auditions, and they didn't want, the token American white girl, straight white girl anymore for much. And I saw the flip, and it was like a light switch went off overnight. It was 8 or 9 years ago, and it just got worse and worse and worse with time. Up until, I would say, about a year or two ago. I feel like the majority of the US population here is sick of the woke agenda. Yes, it still has imprint on education, mostly, probably, in the school system and in colleges, but the Rockefellers took over education, whatever it was, over 100 years ago, and they've been in indoctrination camps for a long, long time. It's really nothing new. I think the woke agenda just highlighted what was kind of always there, and our history that we've been taught has been completely distorted. Science leaves out things like the ether. I mean, the education system's been hijacked for a long time anyway. But other than that, and very, very liberal cities, the US is sick of the woke agenda, and they really want nothing to do with it. So I think it's odd that the right is still clinging on to this boogeyman that, I'm not going to say the boogeyman doesn't exist. He does, but he's not as scary as he once was. And so I keep seeing Elon Musk and Trump and everybody posting about, like, we got to attack woke with the woke thing. It's like, dude, we've already kind of moved on from that. Now we got bigger fish to fry. Now we have the looming technocracy coming in under the Trump administration. I mean, the excuses that the right is making for these absolute swamp creatures that are coming in is mind-blowing. There's a small portion of people that voted for him and know they see the cabinet coming in for what it really is, and they're like, what the fuck? But all of us who said, okay, we're not voting, we don't want to be a part of this, let's get ourselves out of the system as much as we can, are kind of like, told you so. This is exactly what we were talking about and warning about. So the right going back to this thing of woke agenda, it's almost like they're using it as a way to avoid what is actually coming. Like, hey, this is actually a good thing. We kind of overcame a lot of that. So let's take our wins. Like, I think 80% of the woke agenda is over now. I mean, yes, the trans thing is still being pushed, and like I said, the school system. But I mean, I don't know anybody anymore who is all about the woke crap. So yeah, it's the right's still using it as a crutch. And I think that though under the technocracy there is an element of Marxism being used in the depopulation agenda, it's really a hybrid of communism, fascism, and a tyranny under the technocracy that is the problem. And the right and the left have to understand that. Because if they don't get that basic thing, the pool of us who do, like, we're left with cleaning this freaking mess up. So I think the biggest thing to drive home right now is, hey, it's not about Marxism, it's not about fascism, it's a blend of both, the worst of both, under a technological agenda. I'm sure that David has covered, I haven't watched the Dot Connector yet this week, but I'm sure he's going to bring up the fact that Joe Rogan was recently interviewing, I forget what the guy's name is, but they got into conversation and Joe says something about, oh yeah, I'm half kidding when I say this, but I think maybe it would be a good thing that AI would take over our government. Are you freaking kidding me? This is why you're as popular as you are, and you have the platform that you do, and you get paid the way that you do, because when you say the things that we're saying, you get silenced, and you get demonetized and deplatformed, and it's bullshit. So Joe's falling right in line, and it's actually quite laughable. And then he says, oh, I'm half kidding. Half kidding is half truth then too. And who's going to control this AI? I mean, from an esoteric perspective, people in the true alternative world might say that it's, negative entities ultimately controlling it. But let's say you're more of a normie and you think that something else is controlling it. Well, who would it be? It would be humans. So humans are still in control. Like, it's one or the other. It's either negative entities or the worst of humanity controlling the AI. How is that going to solve any problems? Guys, bear with me today. I can barely breathe. Okay. So, next thing that I wanted to talk about is the fear of the end times prophecy. I'm not sure if I talked about it in episode 1, but I've talked about it on social media before and what I believe the end times actually means. And I don't think that it's the end of the world. I think that we are at the end of an age, entering a new age, and it is possible that the end of natural human procreation is going to happen by around 2045. It's projected. So if you think about it, end times, if we're not procreating in the natural, and maybe I'm just thinking about this right now in this way because it's relevant to becoming a mother of a second child again, and I'm in that phase of life. But if natural human procreation is to end in 2045, then you're creating these babies in these matrix-like wombs, artificial wombs, and it's possible that they're going to harvest a new type of soul. Like, it's going to be this NPC soul that is only used for the battery, for a food source, for the lower astral. Because if you're somebody who's starting to connect these dots, are you really going to want to come back? Between the ending of natural human procreation and merging man with machine. Both of those things, wouldn't that be the end times? That's what I suspect. And so all these people who are saying 3D to 5D and the new earth and whatnot, yes, there's a collective consciousness that is raising its frequency at the moment, but it's possible that an actual new paradigm and new dimension is there for us, and we won't be doing this again. That's entirely possible. Or it's also possible that enough people wake up and the world does change. But either way, whether we have more people seeing what's happening and joining, or we decide not to come back, it's all good. Either way, the end result is fine. There's nothing to worry about. But all of these evangelical Christians promoting and actually pushing, like, it's like they want this to happen. They want the end times to happen. It's freaking bizarre. It's all just promoting fear. And I think that's what it's always been. I think that's what religion is. It's there to keep people in fear. Like the term God-fearing. I think it's good for people to know that there's cause and effect for negative actions. Call it karma, call it natural law, call it whatever you want. Yeah, that's good for people to know because it keeps them moral and it keeps them in line in a good way. But thinking that the creator is something to be feared is absolute BS. That has been used to keep us thinking little me, and I see this Christian emergence keeping people in fear, actually. So the next topic is the gender war between men and women. And this is something that's been talked about basically heavily since the Me Too movement and the war between men and women. And you have people like Andrew Tate who are peddling a version of misogyny, and then you have people like Pearl Davis, who I actually did a podcast with, I think it was like a year and a half ago, and I had no idea who she was, and we got into it, because she's ultimately just a woman hater at the end of the day, and you have these social media influencers who, yes, there's elements of truth to what they're saying, but they are, what I see coming out of them is mother and father wounds. So Pearl might say things that are true about the way that men think sometimes, and it's good for women to know that, but it's rooted in what I see as unhealed trauma. There's something there that, like a mommy issue, or with Andrew Tate, same thing. It's like, I think he might have a problem with women, actually. And all of the people thinking that there's this war with the opposite sex, it's all it is unhealed trauma. It's not that our culture as a whole is incompatible with the opposite sex, or that culture or society are strictly to blame. It's that there's always been, or at least for a very long time, trauma, unresolved trauma. Even if somebody has no distinct mother or father wounds in this life, which most people do in one form or another. But let's say somebody grows up with two very loving parents and a mostly healthy home environment. Chances are they're going to do better in their relationships, but even still, they might do certain things that that are caused by wounds that are inherited from 5 generations before. All that stuff can be passed down, and instead of saying that there's this gender war, I think what we really need to be focusing on is, hey, you know, most people have some kind of mother or father wound, and once that is worked out, then your love life and dating experiences will greatly change. It's crazy to see on social media all of these people these women who think it's men's fault and men who think it's women's fault, and it's neither. It's you. It's that you need to do the inner work. That's what it is. And I know firsthand. I mean, I can tell you, I had some father wounds that were present for, I don't know, over 15 years probably. And I struggled in my relationships. Once I worked those out, or mostly worked them out, you know, sometimes certain things arise and I look at it, I'm like, oh, I know what that is. I know how to deal with that. You kind of see your shadow, you do the shadow work, and then you see the shadow pop up and you go, okay, I know what that is. Once you do that work, then you attract the right people or person into your life, and that's really what we need to be doing, not blaming the opposite sex. So I've talked, I think, on 2 of the episodes at least, mentioning controlled opposition. And one thing in the alternative world is, I think we all get a little bit neurotic about who's controlled opposition. And that's normal because we question everything, right? But the best way to figure out who's who is to know yourself. Because the better that you know yourself and the more that you've done the inner work, the better you're going to be able to spot bullshit. Your bullshit meter gets stronger and sharper as you understand the true I. So there's a lot of people who, they're great researchers out there. You know, they do the work, the outer work, the investigating, but they don't do the inner work. So then they're pointing the finger at people who are controlled opposition that aren't. And the best way that we can spot people who are genuine and on the same page as us is to know thyself. So that's a fear that's perpetuated in our immediate web, I guess you could say, that is actually really easy to detect over time. You know, you just give it time and you let people show you their true colors. So I'm going to close on this because I talked about topics that are fear-based that might not exist or are perpetuated and promoted in ways that are different than how they really are in reality. But one thing that is something for us to look out for. That is a real threat, I believe is a real threat, and that we need to kind of shine a spotlight on at the moment, just to be looking out for one another. Is it seems like on social media there are intelligence plants out there that are being used to piss us off and collect data on us. So I recently saw a tweet, it was from a few days ago, with Rabbi Shmuley, I'm sure you guys know who he is, and Candace Owens, and they've been going back and forth for a few months, you know, her getting called an anti-Semite and whatnot. And the more that I sit back and watch that whole scenario, the more I'm like, she could very well be a plant of some sort. So anybody who's critical of Israel and agrees with her on certain things gets labeled. And Rabbi Shmuley's tweet said something like, "Oh, we made Ben Shapiro fire Candace Owens." That's naturally going to piss people like me off. And I went to go comment on it, and then I was like, you know what? I think I know what this is. I think that they're having this theater play out on the world stage so people like me can get pissed off, say something, and then we get put in a category for social credit. Personally, I think the social credit score is already in the works, and a lot of these people who seem like they are fighting tyranny are actually there to collect data on us. And it's something to watch out for. I'm not saying to stay silent and not say anything, but we know in 2020, those of us who spoke out about the vaccine, and possibly anybody who was supporting Trump back then, was shadow banned. I'm still extremely shadow banned to this day, and I know many other people are. So this whole facade of Mark Zuckerberg, you know, being sorry for censoring the things that we were talking about. If you were sorry, you would go and fix the damn problem of me still being shadow banned. It's all an illusion. And so now in 2024, it's anybody who's critical of Israel or anybody questioning the technocrats. Anytime I mention Elon Musk on Twitter, those posts get like no views at all. So they're switching every few years. They switch their game to see who's following, you know, the pattern. It's an algorithmic pattern that they're following. So yeah, don't stay silent, but watch who you're replying to and commenting to, because it may just be there to piss you off and to collect data. So what I'm kind of doing now is just, if I have a thought, I just post it to my own feed rather than on somebody's page who might be a plant of some sort. And yeah, it seems like it's mostly the Zionists who are intentionally doing this to see how we react. Saying absurd things. Like, Rabbi Shmuley saying, we made Candace Owens get fired by Ben Shapiro. I mean, if you're going to play the stereotype, it just seems like an act. It seems like an act. It doesn't seem genuine. And it's something to watch out for. So I think this episode was pretty short this week. Wish me luck on my second baby. And I will see you soon with a really exciting guest next time.
Why do you think it's so funny? You're pregnant.